Boy, I'm going to sit this one out when it comes to Gary. I'm a little bearish. I hope Gary comes back. There's some dynamite people there who went through some unfortunate hard times.
How's it going, guys? It's your boy Mike from Seattle, back with Mazske Finance and Dominic Kosteris. Guys, say hey.
Hey there, Mike and Dom. How are you guys doing?
What's going on, guys?
Hey, so what we're going to talk today on our Knights of the Real Estate Roundtable discussion is Gary, Indiana. We want to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. Is Gary going to make a comeback? What are some of the unique problems facing Gary? And what are some of the unique opportunities that exist in Gary, Indiana and in Northwest Indiana? So real quick, Dominic, will you introduce us to a little bit of your experience in that area? You know, you own properties and rentals in that area. Give us a little brief overview on you.
Sure. I own properties in Hammond, Indiana, which is a few miles away from Gary. I never really thought to invest in Gary. It doesn't have a good name. Let's put it this way. It just doesn't have a good name. I think it was, according to your the latest video, is like the most miserable city.
Yes,
yeah.
Sir.
Now, I can relate to the people in Gary because I lived in a neighborhood which was very blue collar, which had 3 steel mills, and we suffered deindustrialization, as did Gary, Indiana, as did neighboring East Chicago. And East Chicago and Gary, Indiana, they were like a one-trick pony, steel mills. When the steel mills were up and running, these were thriving areas. Once the rug was pulled under from them, you know, it was just a downward trajectory, which never really recovered, unfortunately. But in other areas like Pittsburgh and Chicago, and even other areas in the Rust Belt had a pretty diverse economy. That wasn't really so much the case with Gary, unfortunately.
Right. So a little quick overview before we move on to Mark here. Gary, Indiana was founded in 1906 by the company U.S. Steel. It was founded for that company. By the 1950s, it had grown to almost 200,000 people in population. But then when production of steel was outsourced to other countries like China, it became too difficult for Gary and other local American cities to compete with that cheap steel. It, as Dominic said, deindustrialized. All of the manufacturing jobs left. A lot of the skilled laborers and educated workforce left. And all that was left was people who couldn't afford to move out. And it has suffered significantly at the hands of deindustrialization from that point. Now the population of Gary is only 69,000 people, which is tiny.
There is like a downward spiral. There's like a domino effect. When people lose their jobs, they can't go shopping in the grocery stores.
Right.
The grocery stores have to shut down. They fire people. Those fired workers can't go shopping at the record store. It's like a ghost town.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was the anchor. Once the anchor of any industry goes down, the auxiliary the economy suffers tremendously.
Agreed. So Mark, tell us a little bit about your experience in Gary. Obviously you own rentals there, and what it's been like from your perspective.
Sure. And I'm gonna tell you a couple things here. Like before I started investing in Gary, I had bought 2 rental houses down in Birmingham, Alabama. Birmingham is similar but different, but it's a much larger city. It has a population of over 1 million people. I had also looked a little bit at Detroit. Detroit's a big city. All right, and Detroit fell in hard times as well. So when I found my first contact in Gary and I started doing the research on it, and just some of the facts that you stated, Mike, I found all those the figures and whatnot, and I started looking at it. And I've always been a glass half full kind of guy. So I decided I root for the underdog, and I was like, maybe Mazske, because when I started, I didn't know you, Mike. I didn't know you, Dom. We didn't have a mastermind group. So when I ventured out and bought my first property, no one else was buying in that area. I didn't know, except for the folks who are already there. Within a year, I had maybe 5 or 6 properties. I started getting a couple other people on board who started buying properties. But in the subsequent 3 to 4 years, what I've seen is my properties, they're starting to get fixed up, cleaned up, rehabbed as necessary, and houses where rents were $700, $725, $775, $800. Those rents are now $950, $1,000, $1,200, $1,250. And some of my tenants are coming from outside of Gary. They're coming from Chicago.
Right.
What I don't know is where they work at, because Gary jobs are slowly, it's like pulling teeth. They're slowly coming back to Gary. There's an Amazon distribution center, there's UPS, there's FedEx, there's Hard Rock Casino. So there's changes that are happening. But from the investor standpoint, the glass half full guy, it's like if we get in, as we've been doing, and we get our properties, we clean them up, we fix them up. Not saying that they will appreciate dramatically over time, but if all of my properties in, say, 3 years have gone up $20,000 to $40,000 to $50,000, plus rents have gone up several $100s, from my perspective, life is good.
Yeah, from an investor's perspective, the main attraction to Gary is that it's a lower cost to enter the market. It's easier to buy these houses because they're significantly less expensive than in parts of Chicago where Dominic's from, Seattle where I'm from, or Florida where Mark lives at. These are extremely costly houses. So Gary has unique opportunities in that you can get into the real estate investing game easier. However, the unique difficulties are quality of tenants, types of tenants, the fact that the city itself doesn't have a booming jobs economy. But to your point, Mark, and what Dom had mentioned earlier with auxiliary economies, as bigger companies like Amazon or Hard Rock Casino come in and bring a few hundred jobs or a few thousand jobs, well, all these workers come in, guess what? They still have to eat. They still got to go to the teriyaki joint. They still got to go to the nail salon. They got to get their hair cut. They got to get their car washed. So these auxiliary economy type jobs, naturally, service sector sides come in. What do you think about that, Dom?
You know, when I was thinking about that, I think there is hope for Gary. But if you have a good leadership, they have one really good thing going for them. It's lakefront property. Okay, right. I went to Cleveland back in the late '90s, and there's this area called the Flats, and I talked to some of the locals there. And this was like an industrialized area that they tore down, and they put like these bars and nightclubs. It would take a good leader could utilize the lakefront and maybe attract people to live in this area. Okay, I've seen it done before. But you're right. And the other thing it has going for it, it's cheap. Property taxes are cheap. So I could see maybe some tech companies relocating there, and then poof, you have workers who want to maybe walk to work, and like the idea of lakefront property. I think there can be some hope there.
Right, Mark. What about you? What do you think about that? The prospects of Gary making a comeback.
One thing I like about Gary, when I started doing my research, again, I looked at Birmingham, 1 million plus people. I looked at Detroit, over 1 million people. I looked at Gary, just under 70,000 people. When I started thinking about turning Detroit around or turning Birmingham around, as one investor, I can't do it. But when I thought about Gary, sure, one investor can't turn Gary around. But Mike, you have property in Gary. Caleb has property in Gary. My kids and others have property in Gary. And if there's only 70,000 people, if collectively we own, I don't know, 75 houses, and in a couple of years, maybe we own several hundred houses, that can start having an impact on turning that neighborhood around wherever our houses are. And as one block turns around, it can spread to the next block. So that's kind of how I look at things.
I agree. And, at first I thought, I don't really know the impact that I could have or even our investment group could have. But then you start doing some of the math and, Darius has bought, my friend Kelvin has bought, Caleb, you, myself, Bill, Will, your kids. If we get up to 15, 20 people, the people we've interviewed on our YouTube channels, 15 to 20 people, even if everybody just owned 5, and some people who, like you and Caleb, own 15 or 20, you can very easily get to 200 or 300 houses, but split between everybody. And if you have 200 or 300 well-maintained, remodeled homes with good tenants in there, that's how you actually change a few neighborhoods, maybe even a few different city blocks that way. And if you can start to create a nicer area of Gary, that just encourages people to move back. And I think that people in Chicago, and this is just my opinion, Dominic, you can step in if you think I'm wrong, I think people in Chicago are probably feeling the same squeeze that people in Seattle do. Very few people live in Seattle. It only has a population of 650,000 people. But every day, 2 million people commute in and out of the city because we live and I work in Seattle. I live 45 miles away from Seattle, and I commute the entire way in every single day. And that seems to be the trend with the San Franciscos and the Seattles. And I would imagine Chicago, people are tired of paying those prices and they're moving further and further out so they can get better options. And that's where I think the opportunity in Gary lies. Dominic, your thoughts?
I agree, but again, it all comes back to the administration. And I never really researched the mayor or the city council of Gary. If they have an effective police, there's a lot of variables. If you have an effective police force, if you're investing in the area with infrastructure, attracting other businesses, yes, I think Gary can work, absolutely. And again, most major cities utilize their lakefront. Baltimore, they have an awesome harbor right over there, beautiful condos right down the street there. I think there's a lot. I think the potential is there. I think the potential is there. Quick story: in the mid '90s, a very famous real estate investor. You guys may have heard of this guy, Donald Trump. He bought a casino in Gary. I forgot what the name of it was. And I think he was hoping to make a Midwest version of Atlantic City. I think he had a lot of plans. And he sold it after about 2 or 3 years.
Interesting. Well, hopefully we can make Gary great again, but apparently he didn't knock that one out of the park. I'd never heard that story before.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he invested in Gary, and word has it he wanted to put hotels. He had a lot of ideas, but I don't know the time frame, but I think he went bust sometime in the '90s as well.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, given what you know about Gary and its trajectory, and we've heard your thoughts. You think it's going to be on the comeback, but are you going to continue to invest there? And if so, in what ways?
Sure. Yeah. Yes, I am continuing to invest there. I am researching a couple properties now. I made a video just prior to this one where I mentioned I'm buying 2 houses with the assistance of somebody, and both of them are kind of like burr properties. And then I'm also looking at potentially 3 houses in Gary that I may buy. Now, with that being said, I love the potential of Gary, but I don't know if I do get these 3 houses, that'll give me something like 22, 23 properties in Gary. I may pull back just a little bit to invest in another area, but I'm going to keep my eye on Gary. And I'm not saying I won't. If my pockets get a little deeper over time and I see the opportunity, I may decide to jump into Gary and team up with Millennial Mike or Dominic or Tom Olson, and maybe we'll buy a city block and a 10 block area, like Tom mentioned one time, and maybe we'll just transform that 10 block area. So we'll see.
That would be a pretty cool project right there. And maybe we could make our 10 block area on the lakefront to take advantage of that, like Dom suggested. Well, really, we wanted to do this video because we're really trying hard to, a lot of people ask us about investing in Northwest Indiana and in Gary, and I wanted to do my best to get a realistic review of what it's really like, the struggles the city is facing, and the potential opportunity. Although at the end of the day, as an investment, no investment's guaranteed, right? This isn't financial advice. We could be all completely wrong, and the city could just keep on going down. But I'm putting my money where my mouth is. So is Mark, and even though Dom doesn't invest directly in Gary, he has houses even just like a couple miles from it in very similar areas. I think ultimately we're all somewhat bullish on Gary's prospects for the future. I think I think it's probably going to at least go up. So I'll let you guys give the last 2 words. Dom, why don't you send us off your final thoughts about Gary and Northwest Indiana, and then how people can find you.
I'm on LinkedIn, Dominic Kosteris. I have my own YouTube channel, Dominic Kosteris. You can email me, kosteris@yahoo.com, if you have any questions. Boy, I'm going to sit this one out when it comes to Gary. I'm a little bearish. I hope Gary comes back. There's some dynamite people there who went through some unfortunate hard times with deindustrialization. And then you had in the 1970s redlining, which, with disinvestment, people that went through some hard times. I'm praying Gary comes back. But, I have my niche market, which I've been doing very, very well. But here's the other thing with Gary. Again, I think it could work if you have a good administration that attracts businesses. And I don't know if you'd be able to attract maybe middle-class families, only because there's so much competition in other Northwest Indiana areas like Dyer, Crown Point, Cherville,
Right.
And Munster. Okay, I think they have better school systems, but I really, really think again, if you bring in tech companies, you could probably attract younger single people, which is more than fine. Okay, I think it can be done, but you know what? I think I'm going to sit this one out and let you guys take it.
No worries, no worries, and we appreciate the honest opinion. What I want is people to debate a little bit, to get both sides of the perspective. So we heard Dominic. Mark, send us home.
Sure. Well, one thing for everyone watching this, do not copy any of the three of us. We're telling you kind of the bull story. We're telling you the bear stories, but you need to do your own due diligence. Find the market that works for you, the market that works for me, the market that works for Mike, the market that works for Dom, may or may not work for you. So do your own due diligence. But with that being said, from what I know about investing in Gary, I love the potential of what I can see coming. But even if we have worst case scenario and the city just lingers on for the next 20 years, I don't care. I mean, I do care, but from an investor standpoint, I don't care, because I'm positive cash flowing on all my properties and everything will work out okay. And if I'm right in the optimistic way that even if Gary doesn't become the next San Francisco or the next Seattle, if it just builds up over 20 years to 100,000 people, all of us investors, we're all going to be winners.
Right.
So that's about it for me.
I'm with you, Mark. I'm going to stay positive and optimistic. However, I probably will also try to have Dominic show me some of his tricks of the trade in his little niche market. So for those of you who are watching, please go and follow Dominic Kosteris. I'll put the link to his YouTube channel in the description below. My mentor, Mark, at Mazske Finance. The link will be below. And as always, we'll catch you next time.